economic growth. Live performance.
Women have been great role models.
His family had never lost hope. Contains the genetic material.
Halfway through, the next debate is set as leaders clash over a robo-debt royal commission.
Labor will put the humans back into human services.
The changes to the scheme have been put in place, so the problem has been addressed.
A look inside Mariupol's besieged steelworks as Ukraine fights back in the east. Ambulance delays and long surgery wait lists, the strain on Victoria's hospital system. And the Melbourne Gay and Lesbian Chorus returned to the stage after a 2.5-year interlude. Good evening and welcome to ABC News. I'm Mariam Saab. Opposition leader Anthony Albanese will launch Labor's official election campaign on Sunday. How his party will tackle the rising cost of living is expected to be central to his pitch. But Prime Minister Scott Morrison today unveiled one of his own promises to help ease financial burdens. More from political reporter Tom Lowry.
Is that all right?
Promising a cure to the rising cost of living.
That's coming down by $10.
Scott Morrison releasing one of few new campaign pledges, a commitment to cut the cost of prescription medicines by $10.
There we go.
What we're announcing here today is a real acknowledgement that the cost of living pressures are felt right across the board.
Good to see you.
If the policy sounds familiar, it's because it's been announced before. It was written into the government's pre-election budget, then written out, but was left in two different speeches to Parliament.
This measure will provide a significant benefit to the affordability of the PBS-listed medicines for general patients by reducing the general PBS co-payment.
It was an error which was acknowledged at the time.
He's made an announcement that his own government has abolished twice. Now, it's not about cost of living, it's about his political convenience.
As Scott Morrison urged the party faithful in Tasmania to stick with him.
You may not like everything we've done. You may not like me that much. But that's not the point. The point is, you know what our plan is.
A recharged Anthony Albanese made his first appearance in the West.
How simple is this?
Promising to help fund a fleet of electric buses for Perth, with a former leader by his side and dressed to match. The pair committing Labor to a royal commission into the robo-debt scheme by year's end.
Labor will put the humans back into human services.
A class action on the scheme, which raised automated debts against welfare recipients, was settled in 2020. Scott Morrison says there's no case to answer.
Some almost $750 million in reimbursements have been made by the government, and the changes to the scheme have been put in place. So the problem has been addressed.
Why did robo-debt happen? Why was this debt illegally raised against hundreds of thousands of Aussies? Until we get that answer, the matter cannot rest.
With inflation on the rise, the campaign is crystallising around the cost of living. The Prime Minister is blaming factors abroad and is pushing out announcements aimed at the hip pocket. Labor can sense opportunity. They know this is front of mind for many, and it'll be central to their campaign launch in Perth tomorrow. Back on the hustings.
Good to be out and about.
And hoping the West is where it will be won.
Good luck, kick his ass.
Tom Lowry,
Doing our best.
ABC News, Canberra.
The Queensland seat of Hinkler has been a coalition stronghold for decades, but the rise of a popular independent there has shaken up that contest as a former colleague turned rival tries to dethrone Resources Minister Keith Pitt.
The sugar city of Bundaberg and seaside Harvey Bay, once seen as affordable locations for retirees and families, but many here are struggling.
Obviously the thing on everyone's mind, homelessness. Homes. People need access to affordable housing.
Rental costs have soared and the vacancy rate is less than 1%. Charities are stepping in to help.
As a local charity, we do it with no government funding whatsoever.
Roughly a quarter of the population in Hinkler is aged over 65. These seniors say private healthcare is becoming too expensive and it's taking longer to see a GP. Agriculture is one of the biggest employers. The sector has been hit by rising costs and a worker shortage.
We're getting pretty good on getting a labour force on the ground, but middle management is still a bit of a difficulty. They're short and far and few between.
The unemployment rate is higher than the national and state average.
We desperately need to get our unemployment levels down. Our youth unemployment is unacceptably high and it's been traditionally high, so we've got to find some new ways of sorting that out.
Welfare recipients can be put onto the controversial cashless debit card.
It is a tough but necessary policy. I understand there are people who are opposed.
Keith Pitt holds the seat by a very safe margin of 14.5%. Hinkler has been coalition territory since the 1990s, but the race has unexpectedly opened up this election, with Bundaberg Mayor Jack Dempsey throwing his hat in the ring as an independent. Former LNP colleagues turned fierce rivals.
Hinkler has missed out for many years because it's been a safe seat and taken for granted, and I want positive change.
With Labor and the minor parties in the mix too, preferences could lead to an upset on election day. Johanna Marie, ABC News, Bundaberg.
Russia's hopes of a quick victory in the east of Ukraine have been dashed by fierce resistance from Ukrainian troops. Russia has reportedly been forced into merging and redeploying units from failed advances in the northeast, according to British intelligence. Video has also emerged from the steelworks in Mariupol, where Ukrainian fighters are making a desperate final stand. Europe correspondent Nick Dole reports from the city of Dnipro.
From the land and by sea, Russia's onslaught is unrelenting. The results of what Moscow calls precision strikes are evident in the northeast city of Kharkiv.
They are firing from everything. Rocket launchers, artillery. They don't care where.
In Mariupol, a city now in ruins and under Russian control, Ukrainian soldiers say civilians continue to join them, taking refuge in the underground labyrinth of a steelworks factory.
We can't even go out in the street. Our children have not seen sunlight in a month and a half.
Ukraine's president says with so many lives at stake, he wants to talk with Russia.
After Bucha and Mariupol, people want to kill them because they killed our people. But at the same time, I understand that if there is a chance, we must talk.
The Pentagon says Russia aims to encircle Ukraine's forces in the east, trying to link up troops moving south from the town of Izium with others moving north from Mariupol. In places like Dnipro, the front line is creeping closer. But people here are willing to meet it in their own way.
Hi, Alexei.
Hi, Nick.
Alexei was a bag designer. Now he uses his workshop to make flak jackets and pouches for deadly weapons.
So what goes in these, Alexei?
It's for grenade.
Grenades, okay.
Yes.
Turning out 100 of these a week. As Russia tries to expand its hold over the country's east, people here know Dnipro would be a major prize.
I trust in our armed forces, and I really hope it won't happen, but we are working behind the front line, doing what we must.
Alexei's friend Serhiy makes the metal plates that go inside.
Did you ever think that you would be creating body armour for a war?
I didn't want, and actually I don't want. The only purpose is to save our country.
They say they work through the air raid sirens here. With a war raging around them, there's no time to spare. Nick Dole, ABC News, Dnipro.
Afghanistan has been rocked by another suicide bombing, with more than 50 worshippers killed in the capital, Kabul. The explosion occurred as the faithful gathered at a Sunni mosque after Friday prayers. It's the latest in a series of attacks on civilians during Ramadan. The United Nations condemned the explosion, saying it caused the building roof to collapse, which caved in on people inside. It's the second week in a row that a mosque of minority Sufis has been targeted. Scores of Afghans have been killed in recent weeks in blasts, most of which have been claimed by the Islamic State group. Former tennis champion Boris Becker has been jailed for 2.5 years for hiding millions of dollars in assets after being declared bankrupt. A London court heard how the six-time Grand Slam winner owed creditors $90 million. But the former tennis #1 concealed almost $5 million in cash and assets by transferring money out of his own account and into those of his ex-wives and not declaring property and shares. German-born Boris Becker burst onto the international stage at the age of 17. He won Wimbledon in 1985, making him the youngest man to do so. At the sentencing, the judge said Becker showed neither remorse nor humility throughout his trial. Victoria's health system will be a big focus of the state budget, which will be handed down on Tuesday. New figures today reveal the elective surgery wait list has blown out to almost 90,000 people, and almost a third of the most unwell patients had to wait for more than 15 minutes for an ambulance.
Glenn McQuaid has experienced both sides of the health system. The patient service worker's hip operation was cancelled due to COVID restrictions, and he had to take time off work while waiting an extra 8 months for surgery.
I was disheartened, but I understood the situation due to my background in health.
For those who could come to work, it's been a nightmare and continues to be.
27,500 patients have had procedures so far this year. That's down 6% after the government enacted a Code Brown banning non-urgent surgery amid the Omicron wave. The wait list has now blown out to almost 90,000 patients.
We understand and apologise to those people for the difficulties that they are facing, and the experience is not what we want them to have.
The Andrews Labor government got us into this mess. They're not the right people to get us out of this mess.
Emergency department admissions were also up. Almost all Category 1 patients were treated within the recommended time. But ambulance response times only marginally improved from last quarter. 67% time-critical Code 1 patients treated within 15 minutes, meaning almost a third weren't.
We're still seeing about 1 in 3 patients not getting an ambulance on time, and that includes time-critical emergencies like heart attacks, strokes, car accidents, things like that, where we can't afford to have a delay.
He welcomes the recent paramedic recruitment drive, but says too many people still call ambulances when they don't need to.
Our members are regularly turning up to people who have their suitcases packed. They've been waiting for a period of time. They can absolutely go in a taxi.
The government says Code 1 cases soared by 14% to 93,000 cases, and it's promised its catch-up plan will see 240,000 elective surgeries a year within 2 years. Glenn McQuaid says he's looking forward to helping when he gets back to work.
To start off with probably 2 shifts, then I'll work up and see how I feel after that.
Stephanie Ferrier, ABC News.
Tasmania's inland rivers are recognised as world-class fly fishing destinations. But there are concerns the salmon industry's hatcheries are contributing to thick sludge and high nutrient levels in at least one Central Highlands river. Now that water feeds into Greater Hobart's drinking supply, and some are warning a serious algal bloom could be just around the corner.
Much of Tasmania's Florentine River is pristine. It's a popular destination for fly fishers. On the riverbank, Tasmania's salmon industry grows young fish, discharging wastewater back into the river below.
I will not be fishing below the hatchery.
Fly fisher Gerard Castles has been vocal about concerns with the salmon industry in coastal waters. After a recent expedition, he's now raising the alarm inland.
What I found in the water was absolutely disgusting. I found white bacterial mats. I found the riverbed covered in a brown sludge, and I found white filaments floating through the water.
There's a stark difference between the waters upstream and this downstream of the hatchery, which eventually flows into Hobart's main drinking supply.
We're drinking that water that's got these disgusting white bacterial mats in it.
Tasmanians, the people of Greater Hobart, absolutely have the right to good quality drinking water. And at the moment, the needs of a corporation, the needs of the salmon industry are being prioritised.
The Environment Protection Authority is investigating whether hatchery owner Saltaz has breached its licence, as well as how to fix the algae problem. It says preliminary testing didn't flag issues with Hobart's drinking water. But with 5 hatcheries discharging into the Derwent catchment, there are warnings a toxic algal bloom could be just a matter of time.
If we were to get an algal bloom in those lakes, and particularly a nuisance or toxic algal bloom, that could really wreck our river system.
Saltaz, an industry and state government-owned enterprise, says it complies with regulations and is working towards healthy waterways. Taswater's already spending more than $240 million upgrading the Bryneston water treatment plant, partly to address taste and odour problems posed by algae further up the Derwent catchment.
Certainly, a toxic algal bloom is a health risk if it were not to be fully treated within the water purification system.
An expensive remedy to a problem some argue should be fixed at the source. Alexandra Humphreys, ABC News.
Australia has a new Olympics boss for the first time in 32 years. Ian Chesterman has been elected President of the Australia Olympic Committee in a landslide. He'll be taking up one of the biggest jobs in Australian sport. For the outgoing chief, it was a tearful farewell, with John Coates leaving with a fresh pledge on Ukraine. National Sport reporter David Mark has the story.
So congratulations, Ian.
Ian Chesterman is now one of the most powerful people in Australian sport. He beat the Olympic swimmer Mark Stockwell by 67 votes to 26 to become the new Australian Olympic Committee President.
I'm really excited about the opportunity to be involved in the Olympic movement at this time because the future of the Olympic movement is so bright.
A veteran of the Olympic movement, Chesterman has served as chef de mission at 6 Winter Games. He was also in charge of the summer team at the Tokyo Games in difficult times during the pandemic. Chesterman won widespread praise for shepherding the Australian team through the pandemic and then during the Tokyo Olympics. He's seen as a safe pick, having served as Vice President under John Coates, who's stepping down today after 32 years as President of the Australian Olympic Committee.
Today, with a full heart, I thank you.
The President of the International Olympic Committee flew to Sydney to pay tribute to his friend and Vice President.
You have changed the face of the Olympic movement here in Australia. You are a champion, mate.
On his last day in the job, Coates made a fresh commitment.
The AOC will support humanitarian visa applications by Ukrainian athletes,
while Chesterman outlined his vision.
It's very important at this time that we use sport to change many of the social problems that we have in this country around obesity, around mental health, around social cohesion. We're going to continue to work with the government to try and drive more funding into our sports.
For the Olympic sports, he's a safe pair of hands. David Mark, ABC News.
Time for a sports break. Manly forward Carl Launton is facing a month on the sidelines after he was sent off for a nasty spear tackle in his side's 40-22 loss to South Sydney last night. Meanwhile, this afternoon, confirmation from the Warriors coach, injury set to force Ash Taylor into retirement at just 27.
He was once one of the NRL's rare $1 million men. But after 116 games and a career littered with injuries, confirmation this afternoon, retirement calls for Ash Taylor.
He's definitely been struggling, Braith, with his hips, and he's been through a number of meetings in the past few weeks. That's what it looks like it's going to be, mate, unfortunately for Ash.
Taylor's Warriors securing a special victory this afternoon in Redcliffe, once again thanks to the boot of their veteran halfback.
Johnson's done it again at Redcliffe. Back-to-back wins at this venue in Golden Point for the Warriors.
The New Zealand club is 3-0 at their home away from home. Last night, fans were quick to get up off their seats, but not in celebration, instead outrage over this.
Upended. Hold on, I think he's in trouble here, Lawton.
That was an understatement.
Gone. Sent from the field.
The second rower was just the second player to be sent off this year.
Would you send him or would you sin bin? I thought maybe a decision could have been disputed.
I don't think it was deliberate, and I think probably looked a little worse than it was.
but yeah, lucky that it came off, not too banged up.
Lawton was given a Grade 3 dangerous throw charge today. He's facing 4 weeks with an early guilty plea.
Carl is a person. He's so disappointed because he just doesn't do that stuff to intentionally ever hurt someone, so he's gutted. He feels like he's let us down.
Playing with 12 men for 71 minutes, Manly were gallant but were no match for the Rabbitohs, who won by 18.
Oh, that's just brilliant stuff.
Earlier, the ladder-leading Panthers were far from brilliant but did just enough to hand the Titans a 4th straight loss.
Jerome Luai gives us the James Bond impersonation.
Penrith remain undefeated. Jessica Stewart, ABC News.
Melbourne and Fremantle have maintained their spots at the top of the AFL ladder with wins over fellow finals hopefuls Hawthorn and Geelong respectively. The Demons had to work hard to overcome the Hawks at the MCG, while the Dockers held off a fast finishing Cats side to win by 3 points at Cardinia Park.
A trip to Geelong is always a good test of a side's premiership credentials, and early on it looked like Fremantle's weren't up to scratch. The Cats with 3 on the board in quick time, their tall forwards proving a reliable target.
For about 45.
But the Dockers worked back into the game, Lockie Schultz cutting the quarter-time margin to 9 points.
Schultz loves a goal off the outside of the foot in game 50!
The visitors controlled much of the second quarter, but couldn't take advantage on the scoreboard. Rory Lobb kicking the only major of the term.
Reward for effort finally for Freo, and it's a 1-point game.
Fremantle continued to dominate after the break, opening up a 3-goal lead midway through the third. Uncharacteristic turnovers hurting the Cats, the Dockers well on top at the last break. The game turned again in the last as Geelong upped its intensity.
Here come the Canners!
But Fremantle held its nerve to hang on for the narrow win. At the MCG, it was the Hawks who made the early running against Melbourne. Before the Demons responded, the sides kicking 3 each in the first term.
And he drills it.
The Premiers flexed their muscle in the second quarter, Hawthorn's defence struggling to cope.
McDonald to Brown, 2 in 60 seconds.
But a Jacob Kajicki goal kept the Hawks within 2 at the main break. Melbourne stretched out its lead in the third, Max Gawn again proving a reliable target up front.
And there is that work of art again from Big Max.
And while the Hawks never stopped trying, only a miracle was going to stop Melbourne making it 7 straight wins to start the season. And West Coast's horror season has gone from bad to worse following a 109-point humiliation at home to Richmond. The Tigers dominated from start to finish, Tom Lynch starring with 7 goals. The Eagles recording their second biggest loss at home to slump to the bottom of the ladder. Garrett Muddy, ABC News.
And GWS has revived its season with a 59-point flogging of the Crows at the Adelaide Oval. Toby Green was the architect with 4 goals as the Giants set up the victory in the first half. A bad day got even worse for the home side, losing Brodie Smith with concussion after this spectacular mark, as well as forward Ned McHenry. The victory ended a 3-match losing streak for the Giants. Firebirds Donnell Wallam and Gretel Beita have shown once again why they're the in-form shooting duo in Super Netball. Inspiring their side to a 13-point win over the Swifts in Brisbane. It was slow going for the Firebirds early, but things started clicking as the home crowd was treated to some exceptional highlights. Have a look.
And they fire back into Wallam, who's forced to go backwards, and she does!
The lead pushed out to 14 goals as the Swifts struggled to limit the Firebirds' flair. Wallam finished with 55 of her side's 73 goals. On the synoptic, a trough with tropical moisture is bringing showers and the odd storm to eastern New South Wales and southern Queensland, extending all the way to the Pilbara. Let's take a look around the states for tomorrow. Next, starting in Queensland, it'll be mostly sunny in the state's northwest and the far southwest, with a slight to medium chance of showers elsewhere. In New South Wales and the ACT, a few showers in the northeast with a chance of thunderstorms. Victoria will have patchy morning fog with isolated showers developing over the southwest and central districts. Tasmania will have showers about the western, southern and central areas and the northeast at times, but it'll be mainly fine elsewhere. Early morning fog patches expected over parts of South Australia's west coast and the Eyre Peninsula. Possible light showers about Western Australia's southwest coast, with a chance of a shower or thunderstorm over the northern Kimberley and western Pilbara. And in the Northern Territory, there'll be the chance of a shower or thunderstorm about the west coast, becoming less humid across the day. Looking ahead to Monday's forecast for our capital cities, a shower or two for you in Brisbane, partly cloudy in Sydney, mostly sunny in Canberra, partly cloudy in Melbourne, Hobart and Adelaide, sunny in Perth and Darwin. For 3 decades, the Melbourne Gay and Lesbian Chorus has lifted its voice for equality. But when the pandemic came to town, the singing moved online. Well, now for the first time in 2.5 years, the choir is back in the spotlight.
Singing in harmony after 2.5 years apart. The Melbourne Gay and Lesbian Chorus today back in lights and on song.
It's quite an electric feeling. It's like a big family reunion.
This group is the longest running LGBTQIA+ choir in the Southern Hemisphere. 2020 marked the choir's 30th birthday.
We had 14 or 15 shows right around Victoria. We were going to go to every queer pride event.
But celebrations didn't go as planned. When the pandemic hit, shows were cancelled and rehearsals moved online. But it didn't stop the chorus raising its voice. Carry on.
If you can't meet and sing together in the same room, that's what a choir is, and we couldn't do that, so we needed to move to Zoom. And I suppose we ended up being just a little bit of a support group.
The rehearsals themselves honestly saved me during lockdowns because in deepest, darkest lockdown, it was really hard.
As restrictions eased, the choir came together again, 1.5 metres apart. As we roll down this unfamiliar road.
The state government fund, I guess, allowed us to continue and allowed us to pay our musical directors. It's allowed us to put this concert on.
The last time this choir was backstage for a performance was February 2020, and just a few minutes before the show there's a few nerves, but certainly far more excitement. Almost 70% of the pre-pandemic choir returned to the stage today.
We are singing today come hell or high water, and so the songs are much more positive and joyous.
Sarah Jane Bell, ABC News, Melbourne.
And that's the latest from ABC News. Keep up to date with us at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. I'm Mariam Saab. Stay with us for China Tonight. That's up next.
Building a home causes a range of emotions.
What? Mad? Wow.
Some visions are meticulously planned.
Every inch. So well crafted.
This is exactly what I hoped it would be.
That is magic. I mean, proper magic.
Others just go with the flow.
Drunken eBay purchase. It's going to be really urban meets rural.
How are you going to do it?
Not sure yet.
All new grand designs. Tomorrow on ABC TV and ABC iView.
This is the story you have been waiting to hear.
Who's up for
the best family time viewing? Ready to go anytime.
Get out there. Have a look.
Sometimes you have to do the stupid things.
You're onto something, aren't you?
Entertainment the whole family can enjoy.
Yes!
Okay, you ready?
It's always very exciting.
Cheers to us.
Stream for free. Log in to ABC iView.
The Tiny team turn their attention to 19th century Adelaide.
What an amazing image.
And an aerial extravaganza.
Above a river. Crazy.
Tiny Oz. Tuesday 8:30 on ABC TV and streaming on ABC iView.
Their mates living the dream.
You and Snap had it for a full long time ago.
But friendship has a breaking point.
Go on, mate. Show them who you really are.
Barons log into ABC iView to stream the series.
To keep streaming on ABC iView, you now need to log in with an ABC account. So log in and save something you want to enjoy later by adding it to your watch list. Pick up where you left off across logged-in devices. Plus, check out recommendations to unearth new shows and movies.
So, when does the show start?
Log in with an ABC account and make ABC iView yours.
Hello and welcome to China Tonight. I'm Stan Grant. On the program, what a rapidly ageing population looks like at scale and how China's secondary languages keep their traditions alive. And in a moment, we'll hear from one of China's retired senior colonels speaking from Beijing. In a wide-ranging interview, we talk about the controversial pact with Solomon Islands, a new Cold War, and he restates China's determination to reunify Taiwan.
If they declare independence, they will have to use force.
But first tonight, the latest news out of China. Joining me is Michael Lu. Michael, in a rare televised address, President Xi Jinping has proposed a new global security initiative.
Hi Stan, President Xi made the remarks during a video speech to the annual Boao Asia Forum last week.
摒弃冷战思维，反对单边主义，不搞集团政治和阵营对抗，坚持重视各国合理安全关切，秉持安全不可分割原则，构建均衡有效、可持续的安全架构。 反对把本国安全建立在他国不安全的基础之上。
In his speech, Mr. Xi invoked the phrase indivisible security. That's a phrase endorsed by Vladimir Putin, that no country should strengthen its security at the cost of another. President Xi also said only talks, not sanctions, could resolve disputes in a veiled reference to moves against Russia for its invasion of Ukraine.
当今世界任何单边主义、极端利己主义 都是根本行不通的，任何脱钩、断供、极限施压的行径都是根本行不通的，任何搞小圈子、以意识形态划线、挑动对立对抗，也都是根本行不通的。
And Michael, that language gives an interesting context to discussions this week between China and America's top defence officials.
Certainly, Stan, it is the first time US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has spoken to his Chinese counterpart, Wei Fenghe, who took the opportunity once again to reiterate that Taiwan is Chinese territory. He said that if the Taiwan question is not handled properly, it will have a subversive effect on China-US relations, adding the Chinese military will resolutely safeguard national sovereignty, security and territorial integrity.
And in what has been an incredibly busy week in foreign affairs, Michael, top US official Kurt Campbell went to Solomon Islands on Friday to deal with that international spot fire.
That's right. The visit came just days after Solomon Islands signed a new security deal with China. In a statement after the meeting, the White House said Secretary Campbell outlined clear areas of concern and that if steps are taken to establish a de facto permanent military presence, the United States would then have significant concerns and respond accordingly. Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare has repeatedly said he has no intention of allowing China to set up a military base in Solomon Islands. But there's no doubt the two governments are building a close friendship.
One that has consolidated in such a short period of time with trust, respect, and a genuine desire to achieve long-term sustainable development outcomes.
And the Australian government has been under pressure to explain how that security pact came about despite its clear objections.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison said any military base would be a red line, but did not say what Australia would do if that line was crossed.
I share the same red line that the United States has when it comes to these issues, and we're very aware of that and actions that could be needed, working together with our partners to ensure regional security, not just for Australia, but for the whole region, working together to ensure that we don't have any negative influences here in our part of the world.
Joe Bohr was a senior colonel in the People's Liberation Army from 2003 until 2020 and was director of the Centre for International Security Cooperation at the Ministry of National Defence. He is now a senior fellow at the Centre for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University, and he joins me from Beijing. It's good to have you with us. Senior Colonel Joe, can we talk about what China's intentions are in the Solomon Islands? Is the intention to establish a military base?
Well, first of all, it's a request from Solomon government for us to provide a kind of assistance for maintaining security. So the request, first of all, comes from the Solomon government. I don't believe that it is true that China would wish to establish a military base there. The question is, China only has one logistic supply base in Djibouti to facilitate PLA's counter-piracy operation in the Gulf of Aden, in which we actually had a cooperation with Australian Navy as well. So there is no point for China to establish a military base.
And yet this has been speculated about for some time. You mentioned Djibouti. Of course, there is also the port in Pakistan. China has claimed and militarised the disputed islands of the South China Sea, and there has been a lot of speculation about establishing a military base in the Pacific. Why wouldn't it then lead people to assume that, yes, China does indeed want to establish a military presence in the Solomon Islands?
The answer is very simple, because China has no global military ambition, because China doesn't want to become a global policeman. That is why China so far has only provided humanitarian aid to foreign countries in terms of military operations, be it peacekeeping, be it counter-piracy, be it disaster relief. If you put all Chinese military operations together, you would find their only military.
But sir, we're not talking about a global aspiration. What we are talking about is a regional aspiration, and China has been very clear that it wants to establish itself as the preponderant power in the region. That's why China is increasing a military presence in the South China Sea. That's why we've seen increased military exercises over Taiwan, and that's why China is increasing its presence in the Pacific, is it not?
I think you put too many things together. Because China has no global military ambitions, therefore it doesn't need to establish a military base in South Pacific, where China, apart from economic benefits, doesn't have much security concern. And when you talk about South China Sea, you are actually referring to China's sovereign rights, in the South China Sea.
Disputed, and also, according to the International Maritime Court in The Hague, it was not to be claimed by any party, and China did that anyway.
Well, it is disputed, that is for sure, but China has its own claims based on history, based on its own interpretation of the international law. So we in China believe that the islands and adjacent water in the South China Sea are China's sovereign territory and territorial waters.
Senior Colonel Joe, why, if indeed, as you say, China does not want to establish a military base or a military port in the Solomons, why the need for the security pact in the first place?
And actually, I would ask you a question. Why are Australians so worried about this? Because you are certainly closer to Solomon Islands than China. And if you are worried about China's security pact with Solomon Islands, you actually are in a better position to provide it to the Solomon Islands. And why don't you do that? And why would you oppose to China doing that? And China did this because Solomon Islands asked for it. And I believe as small nations, they probably would try, as all of them would do, a kind of a balance.
Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister, has been very clear. He has said that this is a red line. And if China was to indeed pursue establishing such a base, that it would be considered a red line. I want your interpretation of what that means. How does China see that, a red line?
I don't believe the Australian government is in any capacity to lay any red line for China's cooperation with Solomon Islands. Let me reiterate again, as my government has said, that China has no intention whatsoever to establish a military base in Solomon Islands. Besides, we too are sovereign states, and we certainly are fully entitled to have whatever cooperation we want. So this has nothing to do with Australia.
Well, it does have something to do with Australia because Australia is a Pacific nation and Australia has a long relationship with Pacific nations and a long relationship with a country like the Solomon Islands. Clearly, the United States is going to increase its presence in the Solomons as well. And now the Prime Minister is saying this is a red line. Again, I want to ask you, how does China interpret that language?
Well, I believe you are not doing good enough. Otherwise, why would the Solomon Island government ask Chinese to help, since you are much closer? So won't you set your own soul to find out why the situation has actually happened? And so you should actually be in a better position to do that. And you should have done better. And why would you blame China? Because of request from Solomon government.
Again, you're not really answering the question about the red line and how China would perceive a red line. That is a message coming very clearly from Australia about a line that cannot be crossed. So how does China respond to that?
I don't believe Australian government is in any capacity to lay such things like a red line for China. It is ridiculous. It is laughable for me.
See, language like that, Senior Colonel Joe, it is laughable, questioning Australia's interests in the Pacific. When you couple that with increasing military presence in the South China Sea, increasing military exercises over Taiwan, threats to reunify or take Taiwan by force, which Xi Jinping continues to talk about, does that not send a signal of increasing Chinese aggression in the region?
No, I don't think so. Well, when you talk about a red line, that is extremely ridiculous in that, where is the red line? The red line is it, could you lay a red line in a sovereign state like Solomon Islands? It's not on any part of Australia. So how could you describe it as a red line in terms of cooperation between sovereign states? When you talk about Taiwan issue, 181 countries, including Australia, recognize it to be part of China. So what's the problem if we would use possibly use force as a last resort only?
What is the problem if you use force? Are you seriously saying there is no problem if you use force against Taiwan when Taiwan sees itself as a country pursuing its own interests? It carries out its own elections. It establishes relationships with the rest of the world from Taipei. To say that there is no problem if you use force that potentially could trigger a broader conflict involving the United States and Australia and lead to potentially catastrophic loss of life, and you say there is no problem with that?
If they declare independence, then we have to use force. If there are major events that are used by foreign forces that cause a separation of Taiwan, we might use force. And then if the mainland China concludes that all the conditions for peaceful reunifications are exhausted, we might use force. So these are the three conditions that are laid down clearly in the anti-secession law. It doesn't mean that we would use force freely or willingly.
Senior Colonel Joe, do you believe that we are now in a new Cold War?
I think to a great extent, yes. Actually, I believe we have entered into a world with two Cold Wars. One is in Europe. After this hot war, definitely the Cold War scenario will re-emerge in Europe. And in the Asia Pacific, people do not talk about it openly, especially at the government level. But Donald Trump has actually ushered in this great power competition. And Joe Biden's policy is very much a follow-up. And Joe Biden's policy toward China is basically extreme competition short of war.
And
if competition is already extreme, isn't it a Cold War? What else can it be?
And just finally on that, what about China's role in that? China's support for Russia, China's increasing militarization, and its increasing threats to Taiwan. If indeed we are in a new Cold War, how much is China contributing to that?
China can stand tall and firm because China is not a weight that would be added to the Russian side or to the American side, like during the Cold War. Because at that time, if you are weaker than the two sides that are stronger than you, your weight actually becomes important if it is added to one side. But China now is growing. China is becoming more important. Whatever has happened in the world, it could not change the fact that the world political economic ships are moving toward the Asia Pacific, with China standing right in the center.
Senior Colonel Joe Ball, thank you again for giving us your time.
Thank you.
China is home to hundreds of different languages and dialects. However, the popularisation of Mandarin as the standard national language is coming at their expense. Our reporters Jinghua Chan and Annie Louie explain why China wants its citizens to use Mandarin and how some minority language speakers are pushing back.
Annie 啊，我都想加嘢啦，好差啲做咧。Hi, I'm Annie. Sorry, I forgot. Can we do that again? Hi, I'm Annie. My family is from Taishan. It's a few hours away from Guangzhou, and I speak Taishanese. 我好想要你緊衫，昂山好靚啊！發生啥啦？你真係落雨嗎？有啲熱烈，真係今朝事情太多了。
Hi, my name is Jinghua. I'm 1/4 Taishanese, but I never learned the language. So my first language is Shanghainese.
你到冇得講啊？
到啥地方去啊？
你可以用英文問我準備去學你嘅所英文音。
嚇？你已經走啦？啥意思啊？ That's it. I'm out.
So would you go on another date with Jinghua?
Nah, I don't think I would. I came back to the table and they were gone. What's up with that?
You see, in China, it's common for people from different regions and ethnic groups to have trouble understanding each other.
Like me and Annie.
There are hundreds of different spoken languages in China today, with 7 major groups of Han languages which use Chinese characters, as well as ethnic minority languages like Mongolian, Tibetan, and Uyghur, which have their own writing systems.
Han languages like Mandarin, Shanghainese and Taishanese are still often referred to as dialects, even though they often sound completely different and are not mutually intelligible.
Take this sentence. My family doesn't really like to eat potatoes. In Mandarin, it's 我们家不太喜欢吃土豆.
In Taishanese, 我嘅家閒唔係幾中意吃時代.
And in Shanghainese, 阿拉屋里不是老歡喜吃洋鮮魚.
And misunderstandings were part of the reason people wanted a standardised language in China. In 1913, just 2 years after China became a republic, a conference was held to establish a national language. Delegates campaigned for Cantonese, Shanghainese, or even an invented hybrid, but ultimately the government decided on Mandarin because it had the widest reach.
Since then, government policies have pushed for it to be used across the board in education, media, and the public sphere. First, compulsory Mandarin classes were introduced into all schools.
Soon after, all classes were being taught in Mandarin. And now, kids are told to speak Mandarin even in the playground.
Outside of education, government policies have also pushed for Mandarin to be used in radio, TV, and in public-facing organisations. So other languages are increasingly relegated to the kitchen table or the fish market. Many welcome the switch to Mandarin. They see it as the language of opportunity, of social mobility and international exchange.
And the current government sees speaking a single language as key to national unity and strength. But while these policies restrict the use of all languages other than Mandarin, the impact is especially pronounced for ethnic minorities, whose right to use their own languages is supposed to be protected by Chinese law. But increasingly, minorities are forced to assimilate.
In 2010, as many as 1,000 Tibetan students protested over curbs on using their language in schools. And there were similar protests in 2020 in Inner Mongolia. In Xinjiang, human rights groups have described the suppression of Uyghur and other minority languages as a cultural genocide.
Music is one space where people are pushing back. Hip-hop has become a hotbed of language resistance, with artists rapping in everything from Uyghur to Sichuanese
and lots of other musicians still use their local language too. Recently, a movie shot almost entirely in Shanghainese
meaning the vast majority of the country needed subtitles to understand it, became a surprise box office smash.
侬放心。
更勿管中国大陆的政策是啥，阿拉辣海国外的华人肯定还是会得坚持讲阿拉自家的母语的。
我用會考賽喺海上為我墨爾本上波坦嘅經歷為後，我哋而家好有能力啦。
And Annie Louie joins me now. Annie, even one of China's most historically important languages is under threat.
Yes, that's right. You might be familiar with Manchu because of the Manchu Qing dynasty that reigned from 1644 to 1911. And it was such a hugely spoken language. It was the language of emperors. But in just a few years, it declined so severely that there's less than 100 speakers now.
And many more as well, potentially facing extinction?
Yes, and I used to think that I spoke a critically endangered language, but it's not true. There's actually over 1 million people in Taishan who speak Taishanese and over 1.3 million diaspora around the world. So it's not up to me to carry the flame, thank goodness, because I'm not that fluent. But other languages, there are some that are on the brink. There's over 100 of them that are critically endangered. And it is about those resources that you saw, some of the things like rap songs, movies that help with carrying the languages forward into the future. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with those other languages. And that song, that rap actually really slaps. So I'm keen to learn that language now, Stan.
Absolutely. Annie, thank you.
Thanks.
And now for what's making news on the platforms people use, Weibo and WeChat. And Michael, while the lockdown in Shanghai continues, officials are on alert in the capital, Beijing.
Yes, a number of people in the city were diagnosed with COVID over the weekend, and now many are showing photos of empty supermarket shelves as panic buying sets in.
新冠肺炎病毒感染者初步流调结果显示，目前已隐匿传播了1周，感染者人群多样，活动范围广，目前已涉及学校、旅行团及多个家庭。随着排查力度的加大，未来还将发现续发病例。
And in Shanghai, people are voicing frustrations online.
Yes, one protest video titled Voices of April has been particularly popular. It features audio clips of citizens complaining about conditions under lockdown.
"原来昨天就想送给你的，为什么呢？因为我怕这个大家相互感染。但是呢，今天我想了想，因为病毒呢都不会死人的，要饿死人的。
Authorities moved swiftly to censor the video, taking it down and disabling searches for the film. But netizens keep finding new ways to post it, changing the title or even rotating it to get around restrictions.
Michael, thank you. And residents in parts of the city have been in lockdown now for 5 weeks as officials try to contain the outbreak and pursue a COVID-0 policy. China Tonight met Whitney Lofts, who has spent the time volunteering to deliver supplies to people in her compound.
Today, I wanted to take you guys on a volunteering run with me to deliver essentials to all the neighbours within my building.
I'm Whitney. I've been living in Shanghai for 7 years now. And during the COVID-19 lockdown, I'm actually volunteering.
After I suit up head to toe in protective gear, I head to the front gate and load up a pushcart with whatever needs to be delivered.
So a compound is a series of apartment buildings that are in a gated community. So whether or not you are allowed out of your building eventually and when that will be is really dependent on the lockdown status of your compound.
For buildings like ours with positive COVID cases, residents are only allowed to leave their homes for daily testing, no exceptions. So volunteers like my girlfriend and I have become essential in ensuring that people still get access to everything they need, like food, water, and disinfectant.
So we do have a group chat within our building. The neighbourhood committee representative who's responsible for my building would initially just call out and say, hey, I need bodies to move things. And for me, I do really I did really see this as something that I really wanted to do.
The delivery process is relatively straightforward. As I said, we have positive cases in our building, so we have to have full PPE on at all times when volunteering in order to protect ourselves and others. Only one person is allowed to deliver items for the whole building at any one time. So this process can really take anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours, depending on what and how frequent things are coming in.
One of the main ways that we've been getting necessities in is through group buying. Logistics are incredibly strained right now, so that has been the most effective way for us to get what we need. They do arrive quite regularly, and it is great things that we do need, like fresh vegetables, fruits, rice, noodles.
We all hang bags outside our apartment doors for small items like receiving new rat tests every day. And I love how my neighbor is making a statement right here with that LV swag bag. Kind of makes me feel like I've got to start dressing up too under this marshmallow suit.
I don't think that we're aware of what's coming next, because this lockdown was supposed to end on April 5th and we're still here. We're all just trying to do what we can to move our own small communities through each stage as safely as possible.
Thank you for your service. We really appreciate it.
I really hope we all gonna be free soon. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Communist Party is involved in almost all aspects of Chinese life, controlling the government, the military, the police, the courts, and the classrooms. It might look like the party chooses its leadership from the bottom up. In fact, it's the other way around. Votes for upper committee members are often little more than a rubber stamp on choices made from above.
And that's all for this week. Next week on the show, China's attempts to become a football superpower. I'm Stan Grant. Have a great night.
When we were teenage girls, we loved dancing, didn't we?
We did, yes. It was lovely. Put your pretty dresses on and away we'd go. Mm-hmm. This is the last train coming home too, many times. We didn't get up to too much trouble, did we?
No. It's good to be together.
It is. Okay, here we go. I hope we're off.
What advice would we give to our younger selves?
I think just be polite, help each other, be friendly.
And enjoy it.
Lovely, Beth.
I'm Betty and I'm 92.
I'm Pat and I'm 90. We're happy to be
90 years young.
We
Make it 100.
From the sports page to the front page.
My whole life has been goal-driven.
Lisa Curry opens up on life in the spotlight.
Their whole family became so well known. Everybody felt that they knew them. Nobody knows what happens behind closed doors.
And how loss has changed her.
She's very hard on herself, but Mum's a strong woman.
This was something that she couldn't fix. It's not about medals. It's not about success and failure. It's about family. It's about love.
Australian Story. Monday at 8 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
This is a big business. The medical side of it doesn't seem to be a concern. Just making money. That's all they're in for.
Profiting from the pandemic.
It worries me when for-profits have discovered humanitarian disasters is like a gold strike.
Why would Aston Medical pay you that kind of money?
The company cashing in on COVID.
They knew it was risky, but yet they went ahead with it.
Four Corners, Monday, ABC TV and ABC iView.
For the latest on the federal election, go to ABC News Digital.
Policy announcements and how they impact you.
Profiles of every electorate, including yours.
Anthony Green's guide to the key seats.
You Ask, We Answer is back, and you can see what other Australians are asking.
There's our new Get Ready to Vote checklist, plus live blogs and notifications so you won't miss a thing.
For election news that matters to you, go to abc.net.au/Australia Votes or download the ABC News app.
Leaders face off over a robo-debt royal commission with 3 weeks to go.
Labor will put the humans back into human services.
The changes to the scheme have been put in place, so the problem has been addressed.
Also ahead, Russia meets stiff resistance in the east, dashing Putin's hopes of a swift victory. A new Olympic boss in Australia for the first time in more than 3 decades. And boot scooting in country New South Wales, amateurs, professionals line up to show off their dancing skills. Good evening and welcome to ABC News. I'm Mariam Saab. Opposition leader Anthony Albanese will launch Labor's official election campaign on Sunday. Just how his party will tackle the rising cost of living is expected to be central to his pitch. But Prime Minister Scott Morrison today unveiled one of his own promises to help ease financial burdens. More from political reporter Tom Lowry.
Is that all right?
Promising a cure to the rising cost of living.
So that's coming down by $10.
Scott Morrison releasing one of few new campaign pledges, a commitment to cut the cost of prescription medicines by $10.
There we go. What we're announcing here today is a real acknowledgement that the cost of living pressures are felt right across the board. Good to see you.
If the policy sounds familiar, it's because it's been announced before. It was written into the government's pre-election budget, then written out, but was left in 2 different speeches to Parliament.
This measure will provide a significant benefit to the affordability of the PBS-listed medicines for general patients by reducing the general PBS co-payment.
It was an error which was acknowledged at the time.
He's made an announcement that his own government has abolished twice. Now, it's not about cost of living, it's about his political convenience.
As Scott Morrison urged the party faithful in Tasmania to stick with him.
You may not like everything we've done. You may not like me that much, but that's not the point. The point is, you know what our plan is.
A recharged Anthony Albanese made his first appearance in the West.
How simple is this?
Promising to help fund a fleet of electric buses for Perth, with a former leader by his side and dressed to match. The pair committing Labor to a royal commission into the robo-debt scheme by year's end.
Labor will put the humans back into human services.
A class action on the scheme, which raised automated debts against welfare recipients, was settled in 2020. Scott Morrison says there's no case to answer.
Some almost $750 million in reimbursements have been made by the government, and the changes to the scheme have been put in place. So the problem has been addressed.
Why did robo-debt happen? Why was this debt illegally raised against hundreds of thousands of Aussies? Until we get that answer, the matter cannot rest.
With inflation on the rise, the campaign is crystallising around the cost of living. The Prime Minister is blaming factors abroad and is pushing out announcements aimed at the hip pocket. Labor can sense opportunity. They know this is front of mind for many, and it'll be central to their campaign launch in Perth tomorrow. Back on the hustings.
Good to be out and about.
and hoping the West is where it will be won.
Good luck, kick his ass.
Tom Lowry,
doing our best.
ABC News, Canberra.
The seat of Fowler in Sydney's southwest made headlines last year as the new battleground for Christina Keneally. The Labor senator was parachuted into the safe seat over a local candidate, igniting debate about diversity in politics. Her main rival is a local councillor who's keen to represent her community on the national stage.
In the seat of Fowler, it's handy to know the local lingo. Deputy Fairfield Mayor and former refugee Di Lee hopes her links to the area will give her a good chance.
I live and breathe this community, so this is my community.
But Labor holds a safe margin of 14%, and she needs to beat Senator Christina Keneally, an outsider who recently moved to the electorate.
This is an opportunity for the people of southwest Sydney to have a strong and experienced voice at the heart of a government.
Parachuted in over a local, she's hoping to win over the people.
Christina Keneally should be concerned about Di Lee running in Fowler. Di Lee's contested the state seat of Cabramatta on several occasions and polled very strongly. She's also polled strongly on Fairfield City Council local government elections. She's well connected in the numerically strong Vietnamese community in the district. She will be a serious candidate for Fowler.
Fowler is in Sydney's multicultural southwest. More than 70% of locals have both parents born overseas. 16% have Vietnamese heritage, and the jobless rate is double the national average.
If you want to know the problems of the community, you have to be within it, to understand people's struggles.
Our area is very, very strong Labor, so Christina Keneally might stand a very good chance.
Another local, Courtney Newen, is running for the Liberals. The ABC contacted the party for comment.
After last year's harsh lockdown, trust in government here is low. Advocates say to help rebuild it, the local community needs to be represented in Parliament.
With both candidates keen to be that representative, they'll need to convince voters they're worthy. Nakari Thorpe, ABC News, Sydney.
High-profile independent candidate Jo Dyer will remain in the race for the South Australian federal seat of Boothby after receiving confirmation her British citizenship had been revoked. The independent says her application was officially processed back in February and a hard copy confirmation is in the post.
It was a bit of a near-death experience for the campaign. If we hadn't been able to find someone to talk to, if we weren't able to ascertain that in fact the citizenship had been revoked when it had, it would have been very difficult.
Under the Australian Constitution, anyone with dual citizenship is excluded from being elected to Parliament. Russia's hopes of a quick victory in the east of Ukraine have been dashed by fierce resistance from Ukrainian troops. There are reports tonight that Russia has been forced into merging and redeploying units from failed advances in the northeast. Video has also emerged from the steelworks in Mariupol, where Ukrainian fighters are making a desperate final stand. Europe correspondent Nick Dole reports from the city of Dnipro.
From the land and by sea, Russia's onslaught is unrelenting. The results of what Moscow calls precision strikes are evident in the northeast city of Kharkiv.
They are firing from everything. Rocket launchers, artillery. They don't care where.
In Mariupol, a city now in ruins and under Russian control, Ukrainian soldiers say civilians continue to join them, taking refuge in the underground labyrinth of a steelworks factory.
We can't even go out in the street. Our children have not seen sunlight in a month and a half.
Ukraine's president says with so many lives at stake, he wants to talk with Russia.
After Bucha and Mariupol, people want to kill them because they killed our people. But at the same time, I understand that if there is a chance, we must talk.
The Pentagon says Russia aims to encircle Ukraine's forces in the east, trying to link up troops moving south from the town of Izium with others moving north from Mariupol. In places like Dnipro, the front line is creeping closer. But people here are willing to meet it in their own way.
Hi, Alexei.
Hi, Nick.
Alexei was a bag designer. Now he uses his workshop to make flak jackets and pouches for deadly weapons.
So what goes in these, Alexei?
It's for grenade.
Grenades, okay.
Yes.
Turning out 100 of these a week. As Russia tries to expand its hold over the country's east, people here know Dnipro would be a major prize.
I trust in our armed forces, and I really hope it won't happen, but we are working behind the front line, doing what we must.
Alexei's friend Serhiy makes the metal plates that go inside.
Did you ever think that you would be creating body armour for a war?
I didn't want, and actually I don't want. The only purpose is to save our country.
They say they work through the air raid sirens here. With a war raging around them, there's no time to spare. Nick Dole, ABC News, Dnipro.
A funeral has been held for the underworld boss Mahmoud Ahmad, who was shot dead in Sydney earlier this week. A police helicopter hovered overhead as dozens of mourners gathered at Rookwood Cemetery following a service at Lakemba Mosque. Ahmad was shot dead in Greenacre on Wednesday night in what police have described as a meticulously planned assassination. His killers haven't yet been found. The cost of living is on the rise. While Sydney has fared better than other capital cities, consumers are still being stung with higher fuel and food prices. But according to this week's inflation figures, the sector creating the biggest impact is education, with the cost of some university courses now much higher than they were 2 years ago.
Danielle Villafana is embarking on a new chapter.
I'm a first year at the University of Sydney, so I've only been there for a few months now, and I'm doing a Bachelor of Arts majoring in psychology.
The qualification doesn't come cheap. Her humanities subjects cost more than double what the cohort 2 years ahead of her paid.
My maths class this semester was $500, and my psychology class, being charged as an arts course, was $2,000.
Higher price tags for some subjects were introduced by the government last year as part of its Job Ready package. Now Australia is feeling the economic impact of that decision. In the March quarter, the cost of tertiary education rose by 5.4% in Sydney, making it a key driver of the biggest inflation surge in more than 20 years. Luke Velez from the National Union of Students says it's a daunting time to be accruing so much debt.
Debt is always going to be bad, but it's especially bad considering the sort of how expensive it is just to live in Australia right now.
Alongside education, transport and food costs have experienced the biggest jumps in Sydney. One rising expense that's been easy to spot, the price of fuel. It increased more than 9.5% in Sydney over the past quarter as Russia's attacks on Ukraine sent oil companies into a spin. A trip down the grocery aisle for basics like meat and fruit and veg has become a pricey exercise. That's thanks to COVID-related supply chain disruptions and flooding in New South Wales and Queensland. For students like Luke and Danielle, the rising cost of living and a mounting HECS debt is an unsettling combination.
Our HECS that's just going to be like thousands of dollars that we're going to be paying off for such a long time. It's really, really daunting.
And she's certainly not alone in that feeling. Ruby Cornish, ABC News, Sydney.
The search continues for a Townsville man who went missing on a fishing trip with a friend last night. The two experienced fishermen left the Townsville boat ramp yesterday evening. Both men fell overboard and their boat drifted away in the strong current. They then attempted to swim to shore.
Some stage during the night, the men have lost contact with one another, and the surviving gentleman was located at daybreak this morning.
Water police say 3 helicopters and 9 boats will continue the search tomorrow. For the first time in 2 years, South Australians who have been exposed to positive coronavirus cases no longer have to isolate for 7 days. The relaxation of rules comes as the Premier warns the state is likely to experience another wave of infections later in the year.
The new normal for close contacts, picking up 5 rat tests to use over 7 days instead of a week in isolation.
Make life a lot easier for workers and businesses alike, which is why we've made the change.
Naturally, we're going to continue to monitor case numbers.
Today's case numbers are a slight decrease from yesterday, with 3,907 new infections. 4 more people have died with the virus, while 250 COVID-positive patients are in hospital.
We have to remain vigilant. We know that there will be other peaks and troughs, other waves into the future.
The changes to close contact rules came into effect at midnight. Those exposed to positive cases will now be allowed out and about, but they'll have to wear a mask and avoid high-risk settings.
We have somewhere between 500,000 to 1 million people who are immunosuppressed, for which COVID is not gone. COVID is not a cold.
With more freedom to return to the workplace rather than spending a week at home, South Australians are being urged to only do so if they are fit and well.
If you've got any symptoms, do not feel pressured to go to work. Stay at home. Stay at home. Your workmates and your union will push for you to be paid.
The Australian Medical Association predicts case numbers may rise following the relaxation of rules, putting more strain on the hospital system during the flu season and cooler months.
We'd like to think that COVID is over. COVID isn't going anywhere. We're not going to get herd immunity. We are going to get reinfections, and there are some people who can get very sick, and we could be hit by more variants.
A long road ahead as the state navigates through the pandemic. Sarah Mullins, ABC News, Adelaide.
Former tennis champion Boris Becker has been jailed for 2.5 years for hiding millions of dollars in assets after being declared bankrupt. A London court heard how the 6-time Grand Slam winner owed creditors $90 million. But the former tennis #1 concealed almost $5 million in cash and assets by transferring the money out of his account and into those of his ex-wives and not declaring property and shares. German-born Boris Becker burst onto the international stage at the age of 17. He won Wimbledon in 1985, the youngest man to do so. At the sentencing, the judge said Becker showed neither remorse nor humility throughout his trial. First it was the Tamworth Country Music Festival, now it's the line dancers' turn. Hundreds of boot scooters have arrived in the New South Wales regional city, and they're competing in the largest competition of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere, with a chance to qualify for the World Championships. Take a look.
Boot scooting, hat spinning and tail feather shaking. Dancers have travelled from across the country and the world to be in Tamworth for the Country Dance Festival.
And we've got dancers here from Belgium, Singapore and the UK, which is great to see that tourism back. We've got every state of Australia and territory of Australia represented as well.
Coming over here, it's a whole different event from attending one in the UK or the one in the US. So it gives me a variety to see what's happening in other parts of the world.
What we like about the competition, which draws us to come here, is that it takes us back to our country roots.
And the stakes are high.
This is the only event in Australia that dancers have the opportunity to qualify to go to the World Championships.
The sport has changed in recent years, with the signature boots and country music not featuring in every routine.
Line dancing is very diverse, so we started with country roots and very honky-tonk style with the achy breaky heart, your boot scoop boogie, but it's come a long way in the last few years.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of this event in Tamworth, and it's celebrating its largest turnout yet, with more than 500 competitors and about 800 spectators filling the local town hall. Not even the weather could dampen their spirits. Singing and dancing in the rain. Kathleen Ferguson, ABC News, Tamworth.
Australia has a new Olympics boss for the first time in 32 years. Ian Chesterman has been elected President of the Australia Olympic Committee in a landslide. He'll be taking up one of the biggest jobs in Australian sport. For the outgoing chief, it was a tearful farewell, with John Coates leaving with a fresh pledge on Ukraine. Let's bring in our national sport reporter David Mark.
So congratulations, Ian.
Ian Chesterman is now one of the most powerful people in Australian sport. He beat the Olympic swimmer Mark Stockwell by 67 votes to 26 to become the new Australian Olympic Committee President.
I'm really excited about the opportunity to be involved
in the Olympic movement at this time because the future of the Olympic movement is so bright.
A veteran of the Olympic movement, Chesterman has served as chef de mission at 6 Winter Games. He was also in charge of the summer team at the Tokyo Games in difficult times during the pandemic.
Chesterman won widespread praise for shepherding the Australian team through the pandemic and then during the Tokyo Olympics. He's seen as a safe pick, having served as Vice President under John Coates, who's stepping down today after 32 years as President of the Australian Olympic Committee.
Today, with a full heart, I thank you.
The President of the International Olympic Committee flew to Sydney to pay tribute to his friend and Vice President.
You have changed the face of the Olympic movement here in Australia. You are a champion, mate.
On his last day in the job, Coates made a fresh commitment.
The AOC will support humanitarian visa applications by Ukrainian athletes,
while Chesterman outlined his vision.
It's very important at this time that we use sport to change many of the social problems that we have in this country around obesity, around mental health, around social cohesion. We're going to continue to work with the government to try and drive more funding into our sports.
For the Olympic sports, he's a safe pair of hands. David Mark, ABC News.
Manly forward Carl Lawton is facing a month on the sidelines after he was sent off for a nasty spear tackle in his side's 40-22 loss to South Sydney last night. Meanwhile, this afternoon, confirmation from the Warriors coach that injury is set to force Ash Taylor into retirement at just 27.
He was once one of the NRL's rare $1 million men. But after 116 games and a career littered with injuries, confirmation this afternoon, retirement calls for Ash Taylor.
He's definitely been struggling, Braith, with his hips, and he's been through a number of meetings in the past few weeks. That's what it looks like it's going to be, mate, unfortunately for Ash.
Taylor's Warriors securing a special victory this afternoon in Redcliffe, once again thanks to the boot of their veteran halfback.
Johnson's done it again at Redcliffe. Back-to-back wins at this venue in Golden Point for the Warriors.
The New Zealand club is 3-0 at their home away from home. Last night, fans were quick to get up off their seats, but not in celebration, instead outrage over this.
Upended.
Hold on, I think he's in trouble here, Lawton.
That was an understatement.
Gone. Sent from the field.
The second rower was just the second player to be sent off this year.
Would you send him or would you sin bin? I thought maybe a decision could have been disputed.
I don't think it was deliberate, and I think probably looked a little worse than it was. But yeah, lucky that it came off, not too banged up.
Lawton was given a grade 3 dangerous throw charge today. He's facing 4 weeks with an early guilty plea.
Carl is a person. He's so disappointed because he just doesn't do that stuff to intentionally ever hurt someone. So he's gutted. He feels like he's let us down.
Playing with 12 men for 71 minutes, Manly were gallant but were no match for the Rabbitohs, who won by 18.
Oh, that's just brilliant stuff.
Earlier, the ladder-leading Panthers were far from brilliant, but did just enough to hand the Titans a 4th straight loss.
Jerome Luai gives us the James Bond impersonation.
Penrith remain undefeated. Jessica Stewart, ABC News.
Melbourne and Fremantle have maintained their spots at the top of the AFL ladder with wins over fellow finals hopefuls Hawthorn and Geelong respectively. The Demons had to work hard to overcome the Hawks at the MCG, while the Dockers held off a fast-finishing Cats side to win by 3 points at Cardinia Park.
A trip to Geelong is always a good test of a side's premiership credentials, and early on it looked like Fremantle's weren't up to scratch. The Cats with 3 on the board in quick time, their tall forwards proving a reliable target.
From about 45.
But the Dockers worked back into the game, Lockie Schultz cutting the quarter-time margin to 9 points.
Schultz loves a goal off the outside of the foot in game 50.
The visitors controlled much of the second quarter, but couldn't take advantage on the scoreboard. Rory Lobb kicking the only major of the term.
Reward for effort finally for Freo, and it's a one-point game.
Fremantle continued to dominate after the break, opening up a 3-goal lead midway through the third. Uncharacteristic turnovers hurting the Cats, the Dockers well on top at the last break. The game turned again in the last as Geelong upped its intensity.
Here come the Canners!
But Fremantle held its nerve to hang on for the narrow win. At the MCG, it was the Hawks who made the early running against Melbourne. Before the Demons responded, the sides kicking 3 each in the first term.
And he drills it.
The Premiers flexed their muscle in the second quarter, Hawthorn's defence struggling to cope.
McDonald to Brown, 2 in 60 seconds.
But a Jacob Kajicki goal kept the Hawks within 2 at the main break. Melbourne stretched out its lead in the third, Max Gawn again proving a reliable target up front.
And there is that work of art again from Big Max.
And while the Hawks never stopped trying, only a miracle was going to stop Melbourne making it 7 straight wins to start the season. And West Coast's horror season has gone from bad to worse following a 109-point humiliation at home to Richmond. The Tigers dominated from start to finish, Tom Lynch starring with 7 goals. The Eagles recording their second biggest loss at home to slump to the bottom of the ladder. Garrett Muddy, ABC News.
And GWS has revived its season with a 59-point flogging of the Crows at the Adelaide Oval. Toby Green was the architect with 4 goals as the Giants set up the victory in the first half. A bad day got even worse for the home side, losing Brodie Smith with concussion after this spectacular mark, as well as forward Ned McHenry. The victory ended a 3-match losing streak for the Giants. 11-time World Surfing Champion Kelly Slater's quest for a maiden Margaret River Pro title continues after avoiding elimination in his second round heat. An easing swell saw surfers compete in a more manageable way today after facing up to 6-metre waves yesterday. Currently ranked 5th on the World Tour ladder, Slater says he's still struggling to handle the break at Margaret River despite competing in the event for well over a decade.
It's just a puzzle. It's a challenge, this wave, you know. I've had to kind of loosen up my brain the last couple days, and even in that heat right there, I on a couple waves I felt okay, but I just feel like I'm in a mental rut with this wave.
Australian surfers Bronte McCauley, Stephanie Gilmore and Isabella Nichols won their heats. Organisers are anticipating another spike in the swell ahead of the event concluding this Wednesday. On the synoptic, a trough with tropical moisture is bringing showers and the odd storm to eastern New South Wales and southern Queensland, extending all the way to the Pilbara. Let's take a look around the states for tomorrow. Next, starting in Queensland, it'll be mostly sunny in the state's northwest and the far southwest, with a slight to medium chance of showers elsewhere. In New South Wales and the ACT, a few showers in the northeast with a chance of thunderstorms. Victoria will have patchy morning fog with isolated showers developing over the southwest and central districts. Tasmania will have showers about the western, southern and central areas and the northeast at times, but it'll be mainly fine elsewhere. Early morning fog patches expected over parts of South Australia's west coast and the Eyre Peninsula. Possible light showers about Western Australia's southwest coast with a chance of a shower or thunderstorm over the northern Kimberley and western Pilbara. And in the Northern Territory, there'll be the chance of a shower or thunderstorm about the west coast, becoming less humid across the day. Looking ahead to Monday's forecast for our capital cities, a shower or two for you in Brisbane, partly cloudy in Sydney, mostly sunny in Canberra, partly cloudy in Melbourne, Hobart and Adelaide, sunny in Perth and Darwin. And that's the latest from ABC News. Keep up to date with us at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. I'm Mariam Saab. Stay with us for regional news. That's up
This is a big business. The medical side of it doesn't seem to be a concern. Just making money. That's all they're in for.
Profiting from the pandemic.
It worries me when for-profits have discovered humanitarian disasters is like a gold strike.
Why would Aston Medical pay you that kind of money?
The company cashing in on COVID.
They knew it was risky, but yet they went ahead with it.
Four Corners, Monday, ABC TV and ABC iView.
After the last 2 years, we could all do with a bit of a boost. And a COVID-19 booster, it boosts more than just your immunity.
It's a boost to my bottom line.
A boost to my confidence.
A boost to my fitness.
A boost to our social life.
A boost to my happiness.
Give yourself a boost and keep up to date with your vaccinations by visiting australia.gov.au. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
The resurrection of a family that brought the Philippines to its knees.
Absolute power, there's absolute corruption.
Now the dictator's son is poised to be president.
Can't describe the energy that's here on the street for Bongbong Marcos.
The dynasty dividing the nation.
The young ones, they believe Marcos had a good government.
Social media has spread lies faster and further than facts.
Foreign Correspondent, Thursday at 8 on ABC and ABC iView.
This truly is Canada.
Welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you. Looks like magic to me.
Griff's Canadian Adventure, next Saturday on ABC TV and ABC iView.
My fellow Australians, right now everyone wants to buy your vote. So we're back to bring you all the inside information of how the pollies are trying to spin it to win it.
Gruen Nation, Wednesday, May 11 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
The parties make their pitches to regional Australia as the campaign continues. Another Targa tragedy as the future of Tasmania's rally is questioned. And Back to the Future as steampunk takes over a small country town. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Alison Costello with a look at some of the stories making headlines in regional and rural Australia. The federal election campaign took on a rural flavour this week as the major parties made their pitches to regional Australians. Political leaders are promising to create more jobs in regional towns, but employers say they are already struggling to fill thousands of vacancies. And the statistics back them up, with the latest figures showing a huge increase in the number of unfilled positions outside capital cities.
This mother-daughter team would love to expand their beauty salon in Queensland's southern inland.
Since May last year, we've been advertising on Seek, and we've done promotions on Facebook and just word of mouth, and yeah, it's just been really hard.
Attracting a qualified beautician to the country town of St George is proving difficult.
Finding a whole family to move here when there is opportunities, but it's such a big lifestyle change.
With the unemployment rate at 4%, winery owner David Blackett says regional work isn't attractive when there are jobs going in the city.
Anyone with picking experience would please come to St George. You'll get a job within 5 minutes on any of the farms here. And you know how many applications we've got? Zip, not one.
These businesses aren't the only ones failing to attract permanent employees. In this region, 50 jobs are being advertised right now across multiple industries, but they're failing to attract applicants.
The coalition is promising to create another 450,000 jobs in regional areas over the next 5 years. Labor has also promised to boost regional jobs in renewable energy and manufacturing. But in the past 12 months, there's been a 27.5% increase in job vacancies outside the big cities. New data from the Regional Australia Institute shows there are more than 84,000 positions to fill. Most of those are in Queensland and New South Wales. There are thousands of jobs going in regional Victoria, Western Australia and South Australia too. Rural economist Ben Lyons says immigration needs to ramp up again and workers need more housing options.
The government, I think, at a federal level needs to look at incentives to get people to make that move.
There are plenty of opportunities waiting for them. Georgie Hewson, ABC News, St George.
In Australia's most marginal seat, climate change is emerging as the key issue. Just 371 votes separated Labor and Liberal in the electorate of Macquarie in New South Wales at the last election. Straddling the Hawkesbury and Blue Mountains regions on Sydney's western fringe, Macquarie has suffered devastating bushfires and floods in the 3 years since.
With just a 0.2% margin, the Labor incumbent for the seat of Macquarie, Susan Templeman, will need every vote to win a third term in Canberra.
It's an electorate which gets to have a big say in the democratic process. And I think the result last time showed people that every single count matters.
To get back in, she'll need to fend off the Liberal candidate, local councillor Sarah Richards.
It's something that the government certainly needs to win to make sure they can stay in government, and I'll be doing my very best to make that happen.
In 2019, the Blue Mountains overwhelmingly voted Labor while the Hawkesbury voted Liberal. Since then, this electorate has been hit by the Black Summer bushfires and the worst floods in 44 years, making the environment a prominent issue in this campaign.
Climate change is real here. It's not something that's happening in 3 years, it's happening now. And, we see that with the flooding, we've seen it with the bushfires, we're seeing it with the urban heat. This area really can't afford another Liberal government.
Definitely in the environment, especially coming from up here.
But not everyone sees the environment as the top issue, and those voters are more likely to support the Morrison government.
They are a good government. I've voted for them for the last 45 years. I handle the economy very well.
I think he's very calm. He doesn't carry on when he's talking.
The race here was so tight in 2019 that it took more than 2 weeks for a winner to be declared. Both of the key candidates believe their records in the community stand them in good stead to clinch the seat at this election. Now they just have to wait for the electorate to cast its vote. Molly Gorman, ABC News, Windsor.
The future of the Targa Tasmania car rally is again in doubt after the death of long-time competitor Tony Seymour. The Queenslander had competed for many years with his wife by his side. They were racing in the Mount Roland stage of the rally on Wednesday when their car lost control on a corner, crashing and killing the driver. The race was called off as organisers contend with the future of an event that's now claimed 4 lives in 2 years. Monty Boval reports.
In the dark and wet, emergency crews shine lights by the side of a remote road. A car down an embankment. What was supposed to be a fresh start for Targa, ending in tragedy again.
Just hard to talk right now, to be honest. We're totally devastated.
It was meant to be a safer event, this year celebrating its 30th birthday.
The vehicle's down an embankment and is resting up against a tree.
Targa veteran Tony Seymour killed, his wife and navigator Sandra in the seat beside him. The pair were regulars on the Targa circuit.
There's a lot of rain coming tomorrow, and there's a couple of guys in our class who are pretty good in the rain, so I thought
the Brisbane duo had filmed their various Targa adventures, seen here on Tuesday racing through Georgetown.
So we've got Tony and Sandra Seymour here. So these guys, again, great stories, started in the tour, worked their way up through the categories and now outright contenders at Targa.
And in this video taken last year at Mount Roland, the exact location of yesterday's fatal crash. The 59-year-old's death is the 4th in 2 years. Fellow competitors were given a briefing in Launceston this morning.
Probably one of the most emotional things I've done in my life, to be honest.
The person that we lost is someone who's a veteran competitor, and that's very difficult for a lot of teams who are affected by that as well. And it's incredibly sad after what we went through last year also.
3 men lost their lives in Targa Tasmania last year. It prompted sweeping safety changes.
A lot of work went into making sure that this event was not only complying with those recommendations, but was as safe as possible.
The Mount Roland stretch has made Targa news before.
Hollywood star Eric Bana has escaped serious injury after crashing his car in the Targa Tasmania.
Tony, I'm so sorry.
What exactly happened here remains unknown. The car was pulled out last night and impounded by police while they investigate. Targa is waiting to access a rally-safe device from inside the car. That will be crucial in understanding what went wrong. The race has been cancelled, but competitors are invited to finish the course as a touring event under local speed limits, some doing so in a show of solidarity.
And a lot of them have gone out on the tour, and they're people that would never go in a tour. They're racing car people.
Which could be a sign for the future. Organisers said late last year the event was already transitioning from racing to touring.
I certainly think there's a future for Targa Tasmania.
An event already changed by tragedy, now facing another test. Monty Boval, ABC News, Mount Roland.
Women on Queensland's Sunshine Coast fear drink spiking is at an all-time high in the area's main nightlife precinct. Victims are urging others to come forward, while a popular nightclub is taking the issue into its own hands, bringing in a new frontline defence to keep people safe.
For Louise Thornfeld, Maroochydale's so-called safe night precinct was anything but.
I think it would have just been around here.
This is where she was found unconscious last month.
Pretty much within an hour, I realised that I started to feel unwell. I went to the bathroom and I then passed out in the bathroom. At this stage, I would have had maybe 4 drinks.
She's one of multiple women sharing their stories online about drinks being tampered with.
I definitely know that my drink got spiked because I don't react like this normally.
One line means positive, and on mine you could see I only had the one line for barbiturates.
32-year-old mother Cara Mackay tested positive to having a sedative drug in her system after a night out on Ocean Street.
Definitely didn't feel right. I had heart palpitations, I was anxious, and I felt violated.
Since these incidents, one of the coast's most popular venues is now selling reusable lids at cost price, providing patrons an extra level of defence against drink spiking.
It's a really sad day that we have to go to these measures, but something needs to change.
Experts say vigilance is the best defence.
Don't allow a stranger to buy you a drink, and just keep an eye on your glass. Make sure you don't leave it unattended at any point.
Data on drink spiking is limited, as many never report it.
If we don't speak up about it, it's going to keep happening. So we need to get this out here, get some tests done and get it reported as soon as possible.
Police are urging victims to come forward to reveal the true extent of the problem so they can better help keep partygoers safe. Meg Bolton, ABC News, Maroochydore.
A new system of pay for farm workers came into effect this week. For the first time, fruit pickers will be guaranteed a minimum rate rather than just being paid based on how much they pick. While unions say it gives workers protection, there's concern it could make fruit and vegetables more expensive.
In this orchard south of Hobart, harvest season looks like business as usual. But it's undergoing one of the industry's biggest ever changes.
We're being told to compensate or reward low productivity, and that's where it's going to really hurt.
These workers are getting paid by how much they pick. From today, they're guaranteed a base wage, regardless of the amount they harvest. Some growers say the added costs will be hard to absorb.
The cost of meeting the requirements for people who aren't productive going forward is going to be too high compared to the cost for what we're getting for our product.
Industry bodies say those costs may mean higher produce prices.
It is likely to be the case. There will be higher cost pressures. Whether that transfers into prices or not is another matter, but there will be a pressure on that for sure.
The new rules are also likely to change the makeup of the workforce.
And unfortunately, it will be a less viable workplace for the traditional casual backpackers, students, semi-retired people who used to come in a few days a week, happy to earn some cash in hand or some money in hand.
That will mean more workers like Hendra and Rio, seasonal workers who treat it like a full-time job.
Someone working hard, someone not working hard, so what's the pay same price? I think that's not fair.
It's good, and also I believe that for the whole team it will be good for my team, Timorese team.
Producers, even those who support the change, say consequences are inevitable as an entire industry overhauls its hiring practices. Unions, at the same time though, they say that minimum pay rates have been a long time coming and farms need to quickly fall into line.
So you can still incentivise workers to be more productive, which is good for the farmer, good for the farm worker. Everyone wins out of that scenario. That is still allowed. What this does do is stop those unscrupulous employers, those dodgy employers.
Weeding out the bad apples while protecting those who harvest the rest. Erin Cooper, ABC News.
About 40 tonnes of fodder has arrived on the New South Wales north coast to help flood-affected farmers. 38 trucks laden with bales rolled into Casino last weekend as part of the Need for Feed initiative. The convoy was on the road for 3 days, with some drivers coming from Tasmania and Victoria. It's the group's 8th trip to the North Coast region since February, when the floods began.
Also carrying dog food, food hampers, personal care packs, kids' toys, vet supplies. And tonight we're inviting in some of the farmers who were delivered to already to come and have dinner and drinks with us.
We'll be probably coming back for a while to help these farmers get on their feet, because it's going to take a fair bit when you've lost everything and you're starting from scratch.
Volunteers have distributed the supplies to around 100 properties. As demand grows for health services in the Northern Territory, so too do wait times for patients in need. In Darwin, the wait for specialists like speech and occupational therapists can be up to a year, while in more remote areas, people are being forced to move or give up.
2-year-old Harriet and her mother waited 7 months to access speech and occupational therapy.
So for us, any longer wait wouldn't really have been okay, because we know that these early years are critical for her growth and development. So we actually would have looked into state. Getting up.
Harriet has a rare condition called septo-optic dysplasia, which affects brain development and can cause seizures.
Jump, 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 jump.
The sessions help Harriet communicate with her parents and help her parents better understand her needs.
It's been amazing watching Harriet develop. When I first met her, she occasionally said a few single words, and now we're seeing her frequently use words for what she wants, what she doesn't want, her favourite things. Your turn.
Low, low. Well. Before we got the therapy that we're getting now, we were quite confused and unsure, and that has a bit of anxiety associated with it as well. So it's definitely helped us as a family.
While Harriet now has the support she needs, for many that's not the case due to long waiting lists.
It could be 12-month wait for that support. It means your NDIS funding won't reflect your needs, and you could be going without appropriate support for that time.
It's a problem that's especially bad in remote areas where fly-in, fly-out workers are relied on.
I don't think the data would necessarily reflect how prevalent it is, because I think people are fed up with the waiting. And especially in the bush, it's a concern that people might not engage with that process and receive the support they rightfully should have.
While the pandemic prompted many across Australia to move to regional places, the Territory's disability sector hasn't noticed a change.
We actually found the opposite happened. I think more people were prone to then staying with their families interstate than making the move up north.
Those in the sector say training up remote residents in assistant roles could help ease that burden, and they're hoping workers interstate may once again consider the move. Felicity James, ABC News.
Communities around Australia commemorated Anzac Day this week, with strong numbers attending services in regional areas. In Geraldton, on the West Australian coast, more than 60 trees propagated from a descendant of the original lone pine in Gallipoli have been planted at the town's World War I memorial. Each tree represents a local Anzac soldier who fought overseas but never made it home.
For retired servicemen Trevor Morrison and David Hoare, helping out at the community nursery is about more than tending plants.
Well, it's just recognition. Yeah.
They have been part of a project in Geraldton to grow living memorials for 139 local men killed in World War I.
Being involved with that, especially with the military background, you know, it's pretty special.
So far, about 70 of the trees have been planted at the Midwest City's World War I Memorial. The seeds have come from a tree planted by Gallipoli veteran and local farmer Archie Henville, who acquired seeds from the lone pine tree at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. And the seeds for that tree were collected from the infamous battlefield. Now its seeds are creating the next generation of lone pine trees.
Well, I feel very pleased. I'm sure my dad would be very honoured to think that his Gallipoli tree that he planted 50 years, just over 50 years ago has spread so far.
It's really, really special that the memory of the fallen soldiers will not only just be remembered by a plaque, but be remembered by a beautiful tree from where they lost their lives.
A living legacy for men who didn't return home. Francesca Mann, ABC News, Geraldton.
A Ukrainian artist who fled the war in his homeland last month has taken to painting his new surrounds in southwest Victoria in an effort to raise funds for the war effort. And he's doing it all with donated art supplies from Warrnambool residents who are doing whatever they can to help those suffering half a world away. This report from Daniel Miles.
With every scrape of paint, Volodymyr Normankov pours his heart onto the canvas. The fine strokes belie the trauma he and his wife Valentina faced when they fled Ukraine amid bombing and gunfire.
Our suburb was under heavy shelling. We just slept in the basement of our house. It was pretty scary.
The pair arrived at their daughter Olena's Warrnambool home after a torrid 22-day trip with little more than the clothes on their backs.
We were very surprised by the silence because during the last few days we felt very tense, always expecting explosions.
A simple call-out for unused art supplies saw the couple inundated. Normankov's among 7 displaced Ukrainians seeking refuge in the country town that's doing whatever it can to support the beleaguered city. Piece by piece, stroke by stroke, a sense of normalcy has returned for Volodymyr.
We are very touched by the attention of Warrnambool's community. We're lucky to live here and lucky to be here.
Winslow wool producers Brendan and Susan Finnegan's best fleece can be found in some of Italy's biggest fashion houses. This year, they're donating the best cut and sending the money made to the war effort.
This isn't going to make a huge difference, but they need so much help. But if everyone's doing it, it's when, lots of little people doing things makes a huge difference.
Volodymyr's art set to go under the hammer at a charity auction in Warrnambool this weekend as part of a series of fundraising events run by the community, with all proceeds going straight to Ukraine. But no matter how much is raised, to those far from home, there's always a need for more.
Even this, it's not enough. It's like a drop in the ocean, but it makes me feel better to do something useful.
A healing stroke of paint for a heartbroken nation. Daniel Miles, ABC News, Warrnambool.
Well, it's a well-known rule in the top end, stay out of the water. But as crocodile numbers continue to climb, new research has found salties have changed their eating habits and they're increasingly looking to the land for their next meal.
Crocodiles, they're synonymous with life in the Northern Territory, but mid-last century these iconic carnivores were pushed to near extinction until hunting was banned in 1971.
When they were protected, no one was really quite sure whether they could really recover, but they did recover and the whole sort of system changed and the rest is history.
Decades on, the population is booming once again, and tasty new research has found one reason that might be the case. Crocs are choosing turf over surf.
Now they are primarily feeding upon the terrestrial environment, so taking up feral pigs, buffalo, wallabies.
The study looked at what's driven the increasing crocodile population over the years.
The aim was to see if how was the diet assisting this recovery.
To do that, researchers compared bone samples from crocodiles killed around the 1960s to those of crocodiles in the wild today.
We could see that the signature found on contemporary crocodiles or crocodiles that we see around today, you can see there's more that they have been eating upon what we call the terrestrial food web.
Crocodile expert Graham Webb says the study shows the importance of having museum collections.
What I'm excited about is it just demonstrates yet again the values of museums holding these big reference collections, which sort of started to die out a bit back in the 60s and 70s.
Researchers say the findings are no cause for alarm, and in fact the booming crocodile population is a success story.
This is an incredible recovery. It's something extremely difficult to do, and it's something that, you know, the Northern Territory can be proud of.
From near extinction to more than 100,000 in the Northern Territory, the population has certainly snapped back. Mitchell Abram, ABC News, Darwin.
Sprint car racing may not quite have the glamour and prestige of a Formula One Grand Prix, but the excitement they generate at small country circuits is still going strong. The West Australian sprint car titles were held in Carnarvon this week.
It's not a sport for the faint-hearted. This is sprint racing. And this weekend, 32 sprint cars from across Western Australia trucked their toys and teams into Carnarvon for the WA sprint car titles. Meet Brooke Newson, the only woman competing in the event. Despite racing sprint cars for 2 years, the 31-year-old from Perth has a fierce reputation.
It's just when you hear, you know, the engine clogging over and, you know, you flick that switch, it's just, for me, I love it. It's the best feeling ever.
Speedway racing is very much a country affair. There's 24 speedway tracks across Western Australia, and 21 of those are in regional WA. For many, it's also a family affair.
I'm third generation myself, my son's a fourth generation.
Once you get in it and you finally get that taste for the accelerator, you just want to keep on it.
This team of two are proving one to watch. New to the sport, sprint racer Tim Boujos has been sitting in the top 5 all year, and his wife and solo pit crew member Jess has won 4 Aussie titles on 2 wheels. During the warm-up laps, Brooke Newson's car slammed into a wall after a titanium bolt snapped, and many a wing was lost. They cost around $1,000 each. But despite the setback, Brooke Newson worked her way to the finals and finished 11th. And it was the tiniest of teams who took out the title, which had been previously held by Michael Keane for 2 years.
Yeah, without her, I'd be lost because she does most of the stuff, you know, while we're here. Here she is. And, yeah.
Would you consider going to sprint car?
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, yeah, it'd be the best. So I'm trying to get him to get a 410 or get a drive somewhere else so I can commandeer that one.
This former 2-wheel champion could be one to watch next year. Kate Ferguson, ABC News, Carnarvon.
There's a rich history of struggling country towns in Australia coming up with unusual ideas to bring in visitors. And the latest town to try something different is Dimboola, a wheat-growing community in Victoria. It transformed itself this week with its first ever steampunk festival.
The small Wimmera community of Dimboola is usually a bit on the quiet side. But as the sun went down last night, the streets came alive. More than 2,500 visitors arrived in outfits reminiscent of the 19th century, with a futuristic twist. For some, it was their first introduction into the subculture known as steampunk.
I didn't know what it was, so I googled steampunk because it's not in the dictionary.
Others threw themselves into the theme.
For instance, I've got a ray gun here, and it's steam-powered rather than nuclear-powered.
Festival organiser Chan Oi moved here 3 years ago from Melbourne, where he had a restaurant in the Docklands. For him, this social experiment was a chance to put a spotlight on the Wimmera.
I wanted to see a town come together and have fun in an enchanting environment.
And the Wimmera delivered, impressing even the professionals.
I think this town has the potential to become the steampunk capital of Victoria.
Dimboola's mayor admits she didn't know what to expect.
Hundreds and hundreds of people must be out tonight. It's amazing. The vibe, the music, it's just incredible.
I'm blown away by the response tonight. So many people have been thrilled by it. They've been so positive, thanking in words of encouragement that they want another one next year. I think the region needs another one.
Tonight has exceeded
all expectations, prompting both locals and visitors to call for another festival next year to ensure Dambulla becomes a key destination on the steampunk map. Gillian Area, ABC News, Dambulla.
And that's the latest from ABC Regional News for now. I'm Alison Costello. Thanks for your company.
To keep streaming on ABC iView, you now need to log in with an ABC account. So log in and save something you want to enjoy later by adding it to your watch list. Pick up where you left off across logged-in devices. Plus, check out recommendations to unearth new shows and movies.
So, when does the show start?
Log in with an ABC account and make ABC iView yours. Making miniatures calls for surprising ingredients.
Emu feathers.
Tea bags.
Rhubarb seeds. Fish stocking.
The Tiny team turned their attention to 19th century Adelaide.
This photo is like gold.
And an aerial adventure that caused quite a stir.
There's no safety harness.
Crazy.
Tiny Oz.
It's so quiet. It's...
Tuesday 8:30 on ABC TV and streaming on ABC iView. Mysterious, suspenseful, thrilling. New drama on ABC iView.
Who are you?
I'm a bad person who's trying to be good.
What you did dishonours all cops.
When a man is prey to his emotions, he is not his own master.
There's been a report of inappropriate behaviour.
This life, this is all we need. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone.
To stream the best drama for free, log in to ABC iView.
Police say Mr. Justice Opaz was shot with a .22 calibre weapon.
The Parramatta blast shattered brickwork in the forecourt of the empty family court building.
Who premeditated and pre-planned the crimes.
This series of crimes is unparalleled in Australian history.
Len turned around and said, I can shoot you anytime I want to.
The Family Court Murders starts Tuesday, May 10 on ABC TV and ABC iView.
3 weeks to go. The next debate is set as leaders clash over a robo-debt royal commission. A look inside Mariupol's besieged steelworks as Ukraine fights back in the east. And a new Olympic boss with an aim to push Australia even further up the medal tally. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Mariam Saab. Opposition leader Anthony Albanese will launch Labor's official election campaign. How his party will tackle the rising cost of living is expected to be central to his pitch. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Scott Morrison unveiled one of his own promises to help ease financial burdens. More from political reporter Tom Lowry.
Is that all right?
Promising a cure to the rising cost of living.
That's coming down by $10.
Scott Morrison releasing one of few new campaign pledges, a commitment to cut the cost of prescription medicines by $10.
There we go. What we're announcing here today is a real acknowledgement that the cost of living pressures are felt right across the board.
Good to see you. If the policy sounds familiar, it's because it's been announced before. It was written into the government's pre-election budget, then written out, but was left in two different speeches to Parliament.
This measure will provide a significant benefit to the affordability of the PBS-listed medicines for general patients by reducing the general PBS co-payment.
It was an error which was acknowledged at the time.
He's made an announcement that his own government has abolished twice. Now, it's not about cost of living, it's about his political convenience.
As Scott Morrison urged the party faithful in Tasmania to stick with him.
You may not like everything we've done. You may not like me that much, but that's not the point. The point is, you know what our plan is.
A recharged Anthony Albanese made his first appearance in the West.
How simple is this?
Promising to help fund a fleet of electric buses for Perth, with a former leader by his side and dressed to match. The pair committing Labor to a royal commission into the robo-debt scheme by year's end.
Labor will put the humans back into human services.
A class action on the scheme, which raised automated debts against welfare recipients, was settled in 2020. Scott Morrison says there's no case to answer.
Some almost 750 million in reimbursements have been made by the government. Changes to the scheme have been put in place, so the problem has been addressed.
Why did robo-debt happen? Why was this debt illegally raised against hundreds of thousands of Aussies? Until we get that answer, the matter cannot